What's going on, everyone? So, some of you who are familiar with this channel are aware that I'm a writer, an author. For those of you who are new, I write books, among other things. A couple of the books I've written have to do with dragons. So naturally, you've seen the title of this video. You know what this is going to be about. I am curious about dragon media. Certain things catch my eye that have to do with dragons, and I want to know what's going on. So, having said that, let us unpack Dragonslayer. Let's talk about it. This movie. I am a fan of this movie. Every time I think about when it was released and how not well received it was, it hurts my heart. I have seen this movie before, and I feel like I talked about it somewhere else, but I don't know where. I can't remember where. But nevertheless, I rewatched it recently, and I figured it was time to actually give Dragonslayer a proper discussion. As I said at the start of this video, I've written a couple books about dragons, and I like dragon things. I wouldn't call myself a huge dragon-like nut, but I think having spent a considerable amount of time in a world that I was building that had a lot to do with dragons and having to think about the ways to play with the mythology of dragons and all of that, I've been open to dragon things. Of course, you know, you've seen, if you've followed this channel for any length of time, you've seen there's probably a couple videos on this channel that have to do with dragons. Rain of Fire is one of them, another dragon movie I really enjoyed, that I feel like is in the vein of Dragonslayer in terms of the seriousness of it. It treats the concept of dragons very seriously. Not only that, this movie takes place in medieval times, obviously, where the understanding is, if you know a little bit about the backstory of the movie, that this is set in a version of the real time medieval situation as it might have been during the last days of dragons. Dragons are shifting away from the world. At least there's something there's a line in the movie that talks about the time of magic is passing, and with it, the passing of dragons is not far behind. And so the movie takes the concept of that seriously. And I think in place of things like magic and dragons, you have religion. Christianity specifically plays a minor role. There are characters who believe deeply in the Christian faith and cling to that as a source of strength and comfort in the midst of the darkness surrounding dragons and the destruction that they can bring. So it's an interesting conversation around how religion is a kind of, you have to have a kind of faith to believe in that. Similarly with magic, you have to believe, certainly with Galen as the sorcerer's apprentice, it's beyond belief because it's within him already. He knows he has the ability to do magical things. He's been studying under someone, Ulrich, who has been known to do magic things. So I feel like there's an interesting dance between Christianity and magic, and the faith that both require in order to sort of tap into. And both of them have things that you can't necessarily see about how it's done. Like you can't see how the magic is done. Some words are said, some gestures are made, and then a result happens. Similarly, you can make the case for, at least in this world anyway, and the real world too, in some respects, that the belief in the religion is a kind of, in something you can't see. You're praying to something, an entity, a spirit you can't see, but you believe so deeply in it when certain things happen, good or bad. The result is you think, okay, well, because I prayed, this happened, or because I didn't pray, I wasn't a good Christian, these negative things happened. But yes, nevertheless, everything that's happening in this movie is taken seriously. But this doesn't mean that there aren't pockets of lightheartedness and fun, which for a Disney produced or co-produced project, there has to be some lightness in it. You expect some of that in there. What you don't expect is the darkness of it. In fact, it's probably, I think, one of Disney's darkest movies to date, I think. The movie doesn't mess around when it comes to dragon destruction, character deaths, and the like. It's quite hardcore. If you haven't seen this movie, be aware of that going in, that this is a serious dragon movie. It's not deathly serious. It's pretty close, though. There's pockets of fun. The cool thing about the character of Galen, played by the wonderful actor Peter McNichol, if you don't know who he is, you should know. The dude is a fantastic actor. Kids my age who are kids in the 90s, know him primarily from Ghostbusters 2 as Janosch. If you got a little older and you watch things like Ally McBeal, he was good in that. I personally loved him in 24, season 6 of 24, or day 6 of 24. It was the worst season of the show, in my opinion. But the best thing about that season was Tom Lennox, who Peter McNichol plays. He's amazing in that show. And it's a shame that he didn't get to come back for successive seasons of 24 because he was excellent. He's a young actor here in this movie, but what's cool about him is that, and this is what I love, you don't see this too often with main characters in stories today, where this person is our hero. So Galen is the sorcerer's apprentice. And when his master is out of commission, Galen has to take up the mission of leading this group of men to back to their hometown across the water to go kill this dragon. And rather than taking it seriously at first, he's a little arrogant. He can do magic, but he can't do it well. Like you get the sense he's still learning. He's still an apprentice. He never gets to be a master apprentice. He's learning about how to do it. And when he's doing some of the tricks and magic stuff, he gets carried away. He loses himself, and he loses himself in the actual act, in that he can do these things and no one else around him can. And so he's kind of, full of himself a little bit. And you don't really get to see that kind of thing in a lot of heroes, where they're messing up in their abilities. And this movie sets us up with Galen already having some abilities. He's not learning how to use magic. He knows how to he has a foundational knowledge of magic. If you compare that to Luke Skywalker, for instance, in the first Star Wars film, Luke has not even a base knowledge of the Force yet when we first meet him. And when he meets Obi-Wan, he starts beginning to learn a little bit about stuff, but then it's pretty sparse. Luke really doesn't get to really trust the Force for real until the third act, when he destroys the Death Star. You don't get that kind of thing here. Galen is already a couple levels above Luke in that way, because he already has some knowledge of magic, and he allows that knowledge to go to his head. And it costs him. Galen makes some mistakes that can be costly, and I love that about him. He doesn't really get to be serious for real until it's time to get serious, when he really has to to go up against this dragon, Vermithrax Pejorative, which, by the way, is probably the best dragon name I think ever. There's research on how the filmmakers came up with the name and all that, which is, I'm sure that's cool. But aside from all that, if you don't know the research behind the name, it doesn't matter, because the name itself is just hardcore. It's so Vermithrax Pejorative. It's not a joke. Like, that sounds like it carries some weight. And while we're there, Vermithrax is probably, I think, to this day, still one of the best realized dragons in cinema history. In live action cinema history, I'll say live action. Live action. And I think what the movie has going for it, the way it handles Vermithrax is it reminded me a lot of like Jaws, for instance. If you've seen Jaws, you know that the power of that movie, and we know Jaws is the threat, but the power of that is the restraint that Steven Spielberg shows with not allowing the audience to see Jaws until the last act, until like you don't really get to see the enormity of what you're up against yet. And I think that's partly what makes the movie so strong. Aside from great acting, great cinematography, whatever, all of that is there. But in Aliens, Alien, Ridley Scott's original Alien does the same thing, where you know the threat of the alien is very real, but you never see the alien until the end. And similarly, like you see pieces, and Vermithrax is handled similarly. You see like a hand, you might see like a tail or something crazy, like pieces of her before you really get and then like the back of her head or whatever. But what you see does a really good job of getting the audience to understand the scale of the threat, how massive Vermithrax is. Everything surrounding, like the effects visually, the movement of the dragon, the fire effects, it holds up pretty well still right now. Yes, you can see elements, you can see some of the cracks or whatever it is. It's a little dated, but I don't think you think about that when you're watching the movie. I didn't. I'm just going, the fact that they were able to pull that off with limited technology, and then they had to essentially create ways to make that work, create ways that didn't exist to make this dragon move fluidly, create lighting systems to enhance the threat, because it was, and while we're there, the lair, like Vermithrax's lair, like the caves and stuff, the caverns, the production design of that, it feels like it's such a elaborate situation. You feel like when Galen has to go in there and face this dragon, you feel like he's going into the depths of the depths, whatever the depths are, like lower than that. And not only that, you get the sense that you could get lost. My understanding though, that the set wasn't that big, but you would never know by watching the movie. It feels expansive. And I think at the end of the day, that's what you want. You want the feeling of it to be correct. It feels expansive. It feels dank. It feels threatening. And you add to that this huge dragon who also is threatening. And it's like, it's a recipe for nightmarish situations. If you could really put yourself in Galen's position, like mentally, how he's having to, and it's just him. He has to go into this cavernous place by himself. Yeah, you got a shield and everything. You got a cool dragon scale shield and like a really nice weapon and stuff. But that could easily go wrong dealing with the dragon. Like it's oh my gosh, you feel afraid for him, and it's set up. He might not make it out. The movie does a really good job handling all of that. Vermithrax is a fantastic dragon. I think it's still, and I love Smaug. Smaug is a great dragon from the Hobbit movies. I think that's easily another fantastic cinematic dragon, but it's not practical. I think it's a beautiful dragon. Beautiful, beautiful. But Vermithrax is tactile. Like you can touch her, you can feel like the scales and stuff. It's like, yeah, they had to use some ways to sort of animate the movements and stuff to make her move fluidly and junk, because you couldn't really use computer generated assistance at that time in the same way. You could use computers to program things, the movements and stuff, but you couldn't really animate like how they're doing now. But the fact that the practical effects on display is so good, that's enough. I think that's enough for me. I think if you just look at the hand, there's a sequence where there's a close up of the dragon hand reaching out to grab one of the victims, it's like, oh man, it's so well realized, and it's there. Like if you were on the set, you could touch that thing. And it's a massive hand too. Same thing with the head and neck. They had to build this huge head and like a huge tail, and like just to get a sense of like scale and stuff. Like, and you get a sense of weight too, which I think is hard to achieve when the creation is completely computer generated. It can be done. Actually, we've seen this being done. Going back to Smog, I think Smog is a great example of a massive dragon that feels massive, that's computer generated, and you feel the weight of that dragon. I don't always know I'm not always sure that works in other projects, but as far as practical situations are concerned, Vermithrax is just a masterpiece dragon. The location of this movie, locations, it's beautiful. Green hills, and there's like castles and stuff, and it feels like real. It feels like real lived in medieval time stuff. The costume design is really good, very strong, and the acting is good. I don't understand why this movie wasn't well received when it came out. When you watch it now, it feels like it's Star Wars adjacent. You know, you look at particularly Empire Strikes Back, which came out the year before, and Dragonslayer, and how there was it feels like it could have been, it's Star Wars, like it's a cousin of Star Wars. And when you think about how Star Wars pulls from medieval stuff a little bit, like there's knights and stuff, and you see a lot of, obviously with dragons in medieval times, there were knights and dudes who had to fight those dragons. So some parts of it feel, and you know, come on, Ulrich is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Come on, man. And Galen is Luke Skywalker. And Valerian, Caitlin Clark, the lovely Caitlin Clark, is essentially Princess Leia, who's in disguise for a minute, and then she's revealed, and she has to like then she's really in the mix of the story. You can't tell me this is not the fantasy Star Wars, because even the score lends itself to that. I understand there are a lot of people who don't like the score, but for me, the score works. There are elements of it that feel like off, that don't fit the tone. Some of the parts of the music feel a little bit too like bouncy for what's happening, when I felt like it should have been especially when you have people riding across rolling hills and stuff near the end of the movie. The music should feel more like Lord of the Rings, like Howard Shore's score. People just riding across and it feels too like fun and bouncy. So there are pockets where I don't think the score works totally, but for the most part, I think it does. And the acting is great. The story is good, solid. The world feels really lived in too. You see the villages, and you see the people and how they interact. You get to see them celebrating and dancing and having music and stuff. It's really cool. Anyway, look, I can gush about this movie forever. I think it's a fantastic movie, and I think it actually holds up well, and I think it holds up well against some of the strongest movies of that year, that decade, in the 80s. You know, it was a weird time though to have it be released. It sucks. I think I think I know why now. Talking it through. Raiders also came out in 81, which I'm sure took a lot of the juice from this movie. E.T. came out 82. You had, you know, but I think Dragonslayer is it's such a good movie. And I think it fits right in line. You can watch like a line of movies from starting from 1980. You can look at things like, look at Labyrinth, look at Neverending Story, you know, Empire Strikes Back, E.T., Dragonslayer, Willow. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a bunch of these movies that are like real good movies. And if you haven't seen Dragonslayer recently, I recommend you give it a shot, because it's darn good in a lot of different areas. And it's different. I love how varied it feels. Like the story it's not told in the way you might expect. Dragonslayer is awesome. So if you've stuck around to the end of this video, I appreciate your time. Thank you. for hanging out. I'm getting out of here. More reviews to get together and get up. Take it easy. Take care of yourself. And I'll see you in the next one.